Willa Lancaster regretted saying yes to this date the second her so-called companion opened his mouth. Across the dimly lit, upscale restaurant, her date Travis was loudly bragging about his job, barely coming up for air in between sips of his overpriced whiskey. She had tried, truly, to find something redeeming in him. But when he started talking about how women were too emotional for leadership roles, she knew she had made a terrible mistake. She glanced at the exit, her hands tightening around the linen napkin in her lap. Could she escape to the restroom and never come back? Before she could make a move, Travis leaned in, his voice dropping. "Look, you're cute, but you should really try smiling more and maybe order a salad next time." He laughed like he had just said the funniest thing in the world. Willa's stomach churned. "Excuse me?" "I mean, you don't want to overdo it," he continued, oblivious to the fire now burning in her gaze. "Guys like a woman who takes care of herself." She opened her mouth, ready to tell him exactly what she thought of his advice when a deep, smooth voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." She turned sharply and her breath caught. The man standing beside their table was tall, broad-shouldered, and devastatingly handsome. Dark brown hair framed his chiseled face, and his piercing green eyes locked onto Travis with a quiet, dangerous intensity. The tailored black suit he wore fit him with effortless elegance, exuding power and authority. Travis scoffed. "Who the hell are you?" The man didn't even glance at him. His gaze remained fixed on Willa, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" Something about the way he asked like he genuinely cared made her throat tighten. She hesitated, then straightened. "I was just leaving." Travis laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. You're making a scene." The stranger's jaw tightened. "She's not the one making a scene. You are." For the first time, Travis looked uncertain. He glanced around and seemed to realize that people were watching. Huffing, he rolled his eyes. Whatever, she wasn't that interesting anyway. With that, he threw down his napkin and stormed off. Willa exhaled, finally able to breathe again. "Thank you," she said, turning to the man who had just saved her. His gaze softened slightly. "You don't owe me thanks. He was a fool." She let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, I figured that out when he started explaining why women shouldn't be CEOs. Something flashed in his eyes, approval, maybe. You deserve better." She studied him. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place it. "Do I know you?" He hesitated, then extended his hand. "Harrison Grant." Her breath hitched. Harrison Grant. The name was everywhere on skyscrapers, in business magazines, whispered at high-profile events. He was one of the most successful self-made millionaires in the country, a man who had built an empire from the ground up. And he had just come to her rescue. She started, then stopped herself. "You own Grant Enterprises." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Guilty as charged." She shook his hand, her fingers brushing against his warm, calloused palm. "Willa Lancaster." His gaze lingered on her. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Willa." A strange, fluttering sensation stirred in her chest. She should thank him again and leave. That was the smart thing to do, but instead she found herself saying, "Would you like to sit?" "I mean only if you don't have somewhere to be." Something in his eyes shifted like he was surprised she had asked. Then, slowly, he pulled out the chair across from her. "I have time." And just like that, her disastrous evening took an unexpected turn. As they talked, Willa learned that Harrison was more than just a powerful businessman. He was sharp, witty, and had a rare ability to make her feel like she was the only person in the room. He asked about her work, her dreams, her frustrations. He listened. And she found herself wanting to know everything about him in return. By the time the restaurant was closing, she realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. She didn't want the night to end, and from the way Harrison was looking at her, she had a feeling he didn't either. The restaurant staff had begun clearing tables, the soft clinking of glassware and murmurs of departing guests filling the space. Willa hadn't even noticed how much time had passed, completely absorbed in conversation with Harrison. As they stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth she still felt from his presence. The city lights cast a golden glow over the streets, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't in a hurry to go home. Harrison stood beside her, his gaze steady, unreadable. "Do you need a ride?" She hesitated. Saying yes felt like stepping into something unknown, something that could change everything. But walking away now felt impossible. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. A sleek black car pulled up almost immediately, the driver stepping out to open the door. She shouldn't have been surprised, of course, he had a private driver. Still, the effortless luxury of it all unsettled her. She wasn't used to this world. As they slid into the car, the scent of leather and something distinctly him surrounded her. The silence stretched between them, not awkward but charged. She turned to him. "You didn't have to step in back there." Harrison's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, I did." She studied him. "Why?" His gaze met hers, unwavering. "Because no one should ever speak to you like that." Something in his tone made her pulse stutter. It wasn't just chivalry. It was something deeper, something she didn't quite understand yet. She exhaled softly, turning her attention to the passing city. "Well, thank you, he was a nightmare." His lips curved slightly. "I could tell." The car slowed as they reached her building. Harrison stepped out first, offering his hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it, the warmth of his palm sending an unexpected shiver through her. As she turned toward her building, she felt his gaze on her, heavy with something unspoken. "Good night, Willa," he said, his voice lower now, almost reluctant. She swallowed. "Good night, Harrison." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, but the feeling of his hand in hers lingered long after she climbed the stairs. The next morning, Willa found herself distracted at work, her thoughts looping back to the man with the piercing green eyes. She had been in the middle of organizing a client's portfolio when her phone buzzed. A message from her colleague, Lena. "Come to the lobby, now." Frowning, Willa set her pen down and made her way downstairs. As soon as she stepped into the lobby, she froze. A massive bouquet of deep red roses sat on the front desk, drawing the attention of nearly everyone in the room. Lena grinned as she approached. "Looks like someone made quite the impression last night." Willa's heart pounded as she reached for the card nestled among the blooms. "Dinner tonight?" Her fingers tightened around the small note. This was insane, completely out of her league. And yet, before she could talk herself out of it, she pulled out her phone and sent a single reply. "Yes." That evening, a car arrived at her apartment, waiting outside with quiet elegance. The moment she slid into the backseat, Harrison's presence filled the space. He looked at her, his gaze lingering. "You said yes." She met his eyes. "I did." Something flickered in his expression, but he didn't press further. The drive was smooth, the city blurring past until they arrived at a restaurant that looked more like an architectural masterpiece than a dining establishment. Inside, the ambience was intimate, the lighting low, the air filled with the soft murmur of hushed conversations. Willa took it all in, feeling slightly out of place but unwilling to let it show. "You're quiet," Harrison observed as they settled at their table. She exhaled a quiet laugh. "I'm just wondering how I ended up here." He tilted his head. "Do you regret it?" "No," she admitted, "just surprised." His gaze darkened slightly. "So am I." A waiter arrived, and before Willa could even glance at the menu, Harrison ordered effortlessly, as if he already knew exactly what she would like. "You didn't have to do that," she said once the waiter left. "I wanted to," he replied simply. She wasn't used to this. Someone paying attention, someone making things effortless for her. As the evening unfolded, she realized something. Harrison Grant wasn't just powerful, he was deeply observant, intensely aware of the world around him, and when his focus was on her, it was overwhelming. Somewhere between the first course and the main dish, she found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone before. About her struggles, her ambitions, the moments she doubted herself, and he listened. Not just with polite interest, but with real, unwavering attention. When the meal ended, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers lightly. "I'd like to see you again." Her breath caught. She should be cautious. Men like him didn't just sweep into the lives of women like her. But instead of hesitating, she found herself saying, "Okay." And just like that, the night wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The air between them changed after that night. Something unspoken yet undeniable settled between Willa and Harrison, an awareness that neither of them could ignore. What started as a chance meeting had evolved into something she wasn't sure how to define. He wasn't just a man who had intervened on her disastrous date, he was someone who saw her, and for reasons she couldn't quite understand, he wanted more. Over the next week, their connection deepened. Harrison made it effortless, seamlessly integrating himself into her world. He sent for her after work, introducing her to exclusive restaurants she never would have stepped into otherwise. He listened, not just with polite interest, but with an intensity that made her feel as if she were the most important person in the room. But it wasn't just the grand gestures that left her breathless. It was the quiet moments, the way he reached for her hand when they walked, the way he asked about her day with genuine curiosity, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. She was falling, fast, and it terrified her. She had never been the kind of woman to get swept up in a whirlwind romance, let alone with a man like Harrison Grant. He was powerful, brilliant, and lived in a world that didn't belong to her. Yet every time she tried to remind herself of that, he did something that erased all her doubts. Like tonight, Willa had expected another elegant dinner, another night of quiet luxury. Instead, Harrison had led her to a rooftop where a private table was set against the backdrop of the glittering city skyline. Strands of delicate lights hung overhead, casting a golden glow over the space. A soft breeze carried the scent of jasmine, and in the distance, the hum of the city felt like a pulse, steady and alive. She turned to him, stunned. "You did this?" His expression was unreadable, but there was something softer in his gaze. "I wanted tonight to be different," her heart pounded. "Different how?" He pulled out a chair for her, waiting until she was seated before taking his own. No distractions, no interruptions, just us. Something about the way he said it sent a shiver through her. As the evening unfolded, the conversation drifted into deeper territory. She found herself asking, "Do you ever regret it?" He leaned back slightly. "Regret what?" "Your success, the sacrifices you had to make to get here." A shadow crossed his features. "There's always a cost." She studied him, sensing an old wound beneath his words. "And was it worth it?" His gaze held hers. "Ask me again in a few months." The answer surprised her. Harrison Grant, the man who seemed to have everything, was still searching for something, and she had the terrifying realization that maybe, just maybe, she was becoming part of that search. As the night deepened, so did the pull between them. When the meal ended, he didn't move to leave. Instead, he reached across the table, his fingers grazing hers. "I don't do this," he admitted, his voice lower now. She swallowed. "Do what?" His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Let people in." Her breath caught. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, the air between them thick with something unspoken. Then, slowly, deliberately, he rose from his seat and walked around the table. She didn't move as he stopped in front of her, his presence overwhelming. He reached for her, his touch feather-light as he traced a strand of hair behind her ear. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. Instead, she tilted her face up, her pulse hammering as his lips hovered inches from hers, and then finally he kissed her. The world faded. The city, the lights, the quiet hum of the night, none of it existed. There was only him. When he pulled back, his gaze searched hers as if waiting for regret to settle in, but there was none. Instead, she whispered, "Don't stop." And just like that, any hesitation between them vanished. Willa hadn't expected love to feel like this. It wasn't a slow realization or a hesitant journey, it was a head-first plunge into something deep and consuming, something that made her feel alive in ways she never had before. Harrison was unlike anyone she'd ever met. He didn't just show his affection with extravagant gestures, though there were plenty of those. It was in the way he anticipated her needs before she voiced them, the way he stole moments with her between meetings, how he listened so intently it made her feel like she was the only thing that mattered, and she was falling. Hard, but with that love came fear. She knew the world he lived in: high stakes, relentless ambition, a life where emotions were a liability. And she wasn't foolish enough to think she could fit into it easily. But none of that seemed to matter when he looked at her like he did now. They stood at the edge of an exclusive gala, the kind of event she never would have attended before Harrison. He had insisted she come, promising he wouldn't leave her side, and he hadn't. But as the night went on, she noticed something: people weren't just watching him, they were watching her. Whispers trailed behind them, assessing glances measuring her against whatever impossible standard they had set. She should have expected it. Harrison Grant wasn't just a man, he was a force, a name that carried weight in every room he entered. And now she was part of that narrative. She tried to shake off the discomfort, but Harrison noticed. He always noticed. He leaned in, his voice a low murmur against her ear. "Talk to me." She hesitated, then sighed. "They don't think I belong here." His eyes darkened with something dangerous. "They don't matter." She gave a small, wry smile. "You can't tell me you don't care what people say." He studied her for a long moment, then reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "I care about you." Her breath caught. He wasn't a man who spoke without purpose. Every word he gave her carried weight, and this was a declaration. Before she could respond, someone approached a man in an expensive suit, his expression polite but assessing. "Harrison," the man greeted, his gaze flickering to Willa. "And this must be the woman I've been hearing about." Harrison's grip tightened slightly around hers. "Willa, this is Richard Dempsey, an old business associate." Richard extended a hand. "A pleasure." She shook it, keeping her expression unreadable. Richard turned back to Harrison. "I have to say, you're surprising a lot of people with this one." Harrison's jaw tensed. "And what exactly does that mean?" Richard gave a smooth, practiced smile. "Only that people expected you to settle down with someone different." Willa felt the words like a slap, but before she could react, Harrison spoke. "I don't care about their expectations." His voice was steel. "Willa is the only person who matters to me." Richard blinked, clearly taken aback. "I didn't mean to offend, you did." Harrison's tone was final. "And I don't tolerate disrespect." The man muttered a quick apology before excusing himself, and Willa exhaled slowly, trying to process what had just happened. Harrison turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" She searched his face, seeing nothing but sincerity. "You didn't have to defend me." His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing lightly over her skin. "Yes, I did." Her heart pounded. She had spent so much of her life feeling like she had to fight for her place, prove her worth. But with him, there was no proving, no justifying. He saw her, truly saw her, and that realization sent a wave of emotion crashing over her. She didn't care about the whispers. Didn't care about the judgment. All that mattered was this. Him. And as she looked up at him, at the man who had stepped into her life so unexpectedly and changed everything, she knew there was no turning back. She was his. And from the way he was looking at her, she knew he was hers too. The tension of the gala remained with Willa long after she and Harrison left. She had never been the kind of person to let strangers' opinions affect her, but being scrutinized so openly, judged as if she were some passing novelty in Harrison's life, had shaken something inside her. Harrison, however, was unfazed. As they exited the venue, he guided her towards a waiting car, his hand resting against the small of her back. There was no urgency in his movements, no sign that he even cared about the whispers or stares they had left behind. Once inside the quiet luxury of the car, Willa exhaled, tension unwinding from her shoulders. Harrison didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together with a certainty that made her chest tighten. She turned to him, studying the sharp angles of his face, the way the city lights flickered across his features. "You really don't care, do you?" His gaze shifted to hers, steady and unwavering. "About what? What people think." "What they say." His thumb traced the back of her hand absent-mindedly, as if the touch was second nature. "I've spent my life building something that people have tried to tear down at every turn. If I cared about their opinions, I wouldn't be where I am." She let that settle before asking the question that had been lingering in the back of her mind all night. "And me, what about their opinions of me?" His grip on her hand tightened just slightly. "They don't define you. They don't get to decide what you deserve." Her throat tightened. "But you do." His expression softened, something rare and raw flickering in his gaze. "No, but I do know you deserve more than their judgment." She let out a slow breath, absorbing the weight of his words. It wasn't just a reassurance, it was a declaration. He wasn't just saying he wanted her in his life, he was saying he would stand beside her, no matter what. And that terrified her. Because if she let herself believe in this, If she let herself believe that someone like Harrison Grant, a man who had the world at his feet, could truly want her, then she had more to lose than just her pride. She had her heart. The car slowed as they neared her apartment, but Harrison didn't release her hand. "Come with me," she whispered. His eyes darkened, the air between them shifting. "Are you sure?" She nodded. He didn't hesitate. Inside, the space felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling every corner as if he had always belonged there. He moved with an ease that unsettled her, as if wealth and power had never been his defining traits, as if he was just a man who wanted to be near her. She turned to face him, suddenly feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the dress she wore. "This is different for me." Harrison stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "For me too." She swallowed hard. "I don't know how to do this." He lifted a hand, brushing his knuckles against her jaw. "Then we figure it out together." And just like that, the last of her hesitation crumbled. She reached for him, pulling him into a kiss that was less about passion and more about surrendering to the fact that she wanted this, wanted him, more than she had ever wanted anything. The night blurred after that. Not in a whirlwind of rushed decisions, but in the quiet certainty of two people choosing each other, despite everything. When morning came, Willa woke to find Harrison still beside her, his arm draped over her waist as if he had no intention of letting go. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Willa stirred, the weight of an arm draped over her waist anchoring her in place. The warmth of Harrison's body pressed against her back, steady and solid, like he belonged there. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a golden hue over the room. She barely dared to breathe, afraid that moving would shatter the fragile peace of the moment, but she couldn't ignore the truth nudging at the edges of her mind. Last night had changed everything. Harrison shifted behind her, pressing a slow kiss to her shoulder before murmuring, "You're thinking too hard." She turned to face him, heart hammering at the sight of him in the soft morning glow. His usually sharp features were relaxed, dark hair slightly tousled, green eyes watching her with quiet intensity. "I think it's impossible not to think when you're around," she admitted, unsure if she meant it as a complaint or a confession. His lips curved, but there was something solemn in his gaze. "Then tell me what you're thinking," she hesitated. "This, us, it's all happening so fast." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering. "You regret it?" "No." The answer came without hesitation, and she saw something shift in his expression, something almost relieved. "But I don't know what happens next." His fingers traced lazy circles against her hip, as if memorizing the feel of her. "We figure it out." She exhaled slowly, letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, it could be that simple. But the world had a way of complicating things. Later that day, reality came crashing back in the form of a headline plastered across every social media platform and business site. Harrison Grant's mysterious new romance, who is Willa Lancaster. She stood frozen in her office, the words blurring together as her stomach twisted. Lena, her closest colleague, peeked over her shoulder, eyes wide. Well, that escalated quickly. Willa barely heard her. Clicking into the article, she skimmed past the speculation about her background, her career, her supposed lack of status compared to Harrison's past associations. Every detail of her life had been analyzed, scrutinized, twisted into a narrative she had no control over. Her phone buzzed before she could process the full weight of it. Harrison, she hesitated. She wasn't naive, she had known dating him would come with complications, but seeing her life dissected like this, reduced to an object of curiosity, made her stomach churn. Taking a steadying breath, she answered. "I saw," he said before she could speak, his voice calm but edged with something sharper. "I figured you would. I'm handling it," she swallowed. "And what does that mean?" "It means I'm making sure they know that you are not something to be analyzed like a business acquisition." Something inside her softened. "You can't control everything, Harrison." "I can control this," she sighed, rubbing her temple. "This is your world, isn't it?" Managing problems before they become real. He was quiet for a moment. "This isn't a problem, Willa. You are not a problem." She closed her eyes, letting his words settle. I just..." I don't want to be another headline. You're not. And somehow the quiet certainty in his voice made her believe him, but the scrutiny didn't disappear overnight. Days passed, and the whispers followed her everywhere in her office, at meetings, even in casual outings. People she barely knew suddenly had opinions about her relationship, about whether she was good enough for a man like Harrison Grant. She tried to ignore it, but doubt crept in. Was she built for this? Could she handle being in his world? The questions gnawed at her until one evening, standing in front of the mirror in Harrison's penthouse, she found herself voicing them aloud. I don't know if I fit into your life. Harrison, who had been unbuttoning his cufflinks, stilled. He turned to face her, eyes narrowing slightly. Why would you say that? She gestured vaguely. All of this. The attention, the expectations. I don't know if I can live under a microscope like this. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Do you want to leave? She hesitated. No, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But I don't want to lose myself in all of this either. He stepped closer, his hands settling on her waist. Then don't. Her eyes met his, searching. How? His thumb brushed against her hip. By knowing that none of it matters, not the headlines, not the scrutiny. Just us, she exhaled shakily. And if that's not enough, he studied her for a long moment, then, without warning, dropped to one knee. Her breath caught. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, and opened it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, but undeniably breathtaking. She stared, utterly frozen. I wasn't planning on doing this like this, he admitted, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. But maybe that's the point. There's never going to be a perfect moment. There's only now. Her heart pounded. Harrison. I love you, Willa. The words were unshakable. And I don't want to spend another second wondering what comes next. I want you, every part of you, with me. Tears burned at the edges of her vision. You're serious. His lips twitched. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. A laugh bubbled out of her, half disbelief, half something dangerously close to joy. And then, before she could overthink, before doubt could creep in, she whispered, yes. Relief flooded his expression as he slid the ring onto her finger, then stood, pulling her into his arms. The kiss that followed wasn't just a confirmation, it was a promise. A promise that no matter what the world said, no matter what challenges came, they would face them together. And for the first time in her life, Willa wasn't afraid of the future, because with Harrison, she knew exactly where she belonged. Months later, as she stood at the altar, staring into the eyes of the man who had turned her world upside down, she realized something. Love wasn't about fitting into someone's life. It was about building a life together. And as Harrison slid a ring onto her finger, sealing their vows with a kiss that stole her breath, she knew this was only the beginning.